Hello class, I hope this video finds you well. I'm shooting this video to give you more insight into your term paper. Now I do have an extensive term paper guideline that is available on D2L, and I would highly urge you to read through that guideline. It gives you all my expectations for the term paper and instructions from beginning to end on how to write it. It also gives you a lot of examples that you can use in writing it as well. But I want to use this video to give you some additional tips and further insight onto writing it. First, you will turn the term paper in using the D2L Dropbox. And if you look on the Dropbox prior to that, you will see a grading rubric. And I would encourage you to take a look at that. That will give you insight on how I will actually grade the paper. I will use a rubric to grade and then make some comments when I do so. But that will give you a lot of additional feedback and some insight even prior to the paper is due on how it will be graded. And of course, I will use the rubric and the guideline together in doing so. Now, the first step to completing your term paper is to read the book that is the basis for your term paper. And you don't need to do any outside research. In fact, I prohibited that for this assignment. I really want you to focus on the book. And the book is Zhenru Liu's The Silk Road, A Brief History with Documents. And it's listed on the syllabus, the exact ISBN number. You should already have this book. You should have gotten it at the beginning of the semester. And now is the time to break that out and to begin reading it. If you did not get the book, you need to order it as soon as possible from an online bookseller. At this point, the GHC bookstore will have sent it back. And if you don't know what it looks like, the book looks like this. So, you'll need to get a hold of the book, begin reading it. First, read the introduction. That is a critical section of the book. And then that's from the author. And then you'll need to go through and read the primary sources that follow the introduction. And as you read, underline key passages or take notes on key passages. That will help you down the road when you read the term paper. Now, when you look at the term paper guideline, the first page gives you the basic nuts and bolts of the assignments. It is a 4 to 6 page paper, 12-point font, double-spaced. And you'll see from the outset that there are two big options for you to choose from in writing the term paper. Only do one of those. These are big set of interlocking questions you need to address. If you try to do both of them, essentially you'll write two papers, and I'm not asking for that. It's way too much. So choose one of the main topics there, and you'll see a series of interlocking, interrelated questions for each topic. And what you need to do in your term paper is to go through and systematically answer all of those questions with specific examples. The more specific examples that you can give, the more concretely you can answer it, the better. And for this paper, you need to have an introduction with a thesis statement that makes a clear argument, and then a main body in which you go through and answer all the questions as I just described using specific examples, and then a conclusion in which you wrap up the paper and refer back to your thesis statement and sort of tie it all in a nice bow, so to speak. As you write your paper, make sure that it's organized in a logical fashion, that you don't jump around a lot. That makes it confusing for the reader. And it's not required, but I would suggest making an outline prior to writing your term paper. And by the way, if a 4 to 6 page paper sounds like a long paper, if you make an outline first, the paper will write itself, and it's not quite as difficult as a task as you might imagine. So again, an outline is not required, but it's a good idea to organize your thoughts, and if you have a good outline from the outset and then follow that, the paper will write itself, and it will be much easier for you. Now, you need a minimum of 4 primary sources to cite in your paper. And in your paper, you need concrete evidence for the assertions you make. So that requires citing from the book. Certainly you can cite from the introduction, but as a minimum, you need to cite from 4 primary sources. And if you look under the top each topic, I'll give you an example of several documents that you could cite, and as well as the page numbers to find them in for each topic. And those are not exhaustive. Those are just several examples you could use. You can certainly find other documents that would be relevant. But I would encourage you to look at the examples I give, as they are very good ones that you can use to write your term paper. Now, as you cite from either the introduction or those primary sources, what you'll need to do is either, one, sum up information and then tell me where you got it from, cite it, or in some cases you will find direct quotes that really go to a particular point you want to make and that you want to use. Direct quotes can really hammer home a particular point that you want to use those in your paper. So either summing up information or direct quotes is how you'll need to cite things. And as a general rule of thumb, you should have a citation in 1 or 2 citations per paragraph. Now make sure that when you quote directly and use a direct quote from one of the sources, that you use those judiciously, that you don't use too many long quotes, and especially don't just fill your paper up with quotes to add space to it. Excuse me. The citations and quotations you make should be there to serve a purpose, to demonstrate evidence of what you're saying. Now, in terms of the citation style for this paper, the discipline of history uses the Turabian citation style, also known as the Chicago manual style. And that means footnotes or endnotes. And if you look on the term paper guideline, I give you examples of what that looks like and examples of how to cite it. Now, if you're using Microsoft Word, typically you'll go into Insert and then Footnotes, and then the computer will automatically insert that for you. But in any case, if you're using a different version, you'll need to look up how do I use footnotes for whatever version of Word you're using or whatever program you're using to write the paper. But look on that. It shows you how to use footnotes or endnotes. Either footnotes or endnotes are acceptable. I personally prefer footnotes. I think they're easier to use. But you will need to use the Turabian citation style. And again, the term paper lays out exactly how to do that. I give you examples from the book itself. So please use those as a model. Now, in addition to the citation style, another thing that will be helpful for you as you cite sources is to make sure that you do so in a fashion in which it flows with your paper. And a good tip for that is a method called the ICE method. And what that means is you first, if you're using a direct quote, you introduce it, then you cite the quote, and then you explain it in your own words. And that helps you analyze it a bit more and unpack it a bit more. And all of that makes it flow better with your paper. So please use the ICE method as you are quoting in your paper. Don't just drop quotes in sort of randomly into your paper. That scrambles it and makes it hard to understand or hard to really know the context of what you're doing. So I would encourage you to use this ICE method of citation. A few other things with regard to your term paper. Now, this is obviously a history term paper, and I will not grade it as strictly as an English professor for grammatical errors and spelling mistakes and awkward sentences and all of those sort of things. Nonetheless, I will count off for papers that are littered with these sort of problems. And the point is not to be nitpicky. The point is not to really harp on these matters. Nonetheless, if your paper has a number of these sort of problems, you'll have a difficult time communicating your main points. And therefore, I won't understand what you're saying, or anyone else who's reading the paper won't understand what you're saying. And if readers cannot understand what you're saying, if your communication is that cloudy, then you will lose points accordingly. So what I would really encourage you to do in order to clean up spelling mistakes and grammatical errors and awkward sentences that are difficult to understand is to read your paper aloud before you turn it in. If you do that, you will catch those sort of problems. particularly awkwardly worded sentences, but also grammatical errors. You can obviously use spell check as well. That will catch spelling errors. Another thing you can do, particularly if writing a paper is something that you are particularly fearful about, or that you consider that a weakness of yours, is to take your paper to the tutorial center. Now, on each GHC campus, there's a tutorial center, so you'd have to go into campus to do that. The tutorial center, they will not write your paper for you, but they will read it over, and they will offer helpful suggestions. And that's a free service. You've paid with your tuition and fees. So I would encourage you to use that. Now, the earlier you write your paper, the earlier you share it with them, the more feedback you can get from them. Also, if you feel comfortable doing so and would like to send me a rough draft so that I can send you some feedback, I would be more than willing to do that as well. The more lead time you can give me, the better feedback I can provide to you. And that certainly is not a requirement, but if you would like pointers from me or for me to look over a rough draft and give some suggestions, I would be happy to do so. Now, one last point, and this is not a very pleasant one, but I do want to remind you about this, is the issue of plagiarism. Now, I have this detailed greatly on the syllabus, but to remind you at this point, plagiarism will not be tolerated for the term paper. If you are passing someone else's writing off as your own, cutting and pasting things off Wikipedia or those sort of things, that sort of behavior will not be tolerated. You need to do your own work, and otherwise we won't have problems. And I realize that does not apply to most of you, but for those of you who are tempted to that, do know that if you are caught plagiarizing on the term paper, the penalty is an F in the class. And so that is pretty severe, but the purpose of that is to protect the integrity of the vast majority of people who do their work. And do note that as you turn it in on the Dropbox in D2L, I do have turnitin.com enabled, which will run your papers automatically through sources that will catch plagiarism. So in essence, don't go there and we won't have a problem. But if you do have questions about what plagiarism is all about, please see the syllabus. And if you have further questions, please contact me individually. Well, I hope this video has given you some further insight on your term paper. If you have questions, please shoot me an email and let me know. And please, again, use the term paper guideline. It is very extensive and is there to help you along the way. I look forward to reading your term papers. And again, if you have questions, just let me know. All right, I'll stop here. Bye.